The old security camera blinked twice and then went dark. No one noticed. Not the forklift driver, not the woman emptying trash bins into the back alley. Certainly not the man in the faded gray uniform who stood at the far end of the loading dock, motionless, staring at the factory's back door like he was about to enter hell itself. But it wasn't hell. It was his. Jonathan M. Kessler had built this empire from scratch. Now, standing unnoticed and unrecognizable in a worker's uniform, he was about to infiltrate it as a ghost. 3 weeks ago, his assistant had handed him a list of workers who had filed complaints, mistreatment, unsafe environments, toxic managers. That was normal. But one complaint came with a letter, an anonymous one typed, cold, and oddly ... accurate. You built a kingdom, Mr. Kessler, but your throne is surrounded by rats. And at the end, a warning. The decay starts from within. I dare you to see it. No signature, no clues. But it was enough to shake Jonathan, because something had felt off for months. He had felt it in the polished silences of board meetings, in the way people avoided eye contact when he toured the upper floors, in the sudden increase in turnover on the factory floor. Now he was here, not as Jonathan Kessler, billionaire founder of Kessler Industrial Technologies, but as Mike, a temp hired through a shell company he owned in secret. He adjusted his hard hat, exhaled, and walked into the factory. His first impression was ... noise. Not just mechanical noise, but human noise. Laughter that didn't sound quite real. Orders barked with more force than necessary. Jokes muttered like weapons, thrown in passing. The line supervisor, Doug, was a tall man with a voice like rusted steel and eyes that lingered too long. You the new guy? Doug didn't look at him when he spoke. Yeah, Mike, grab a vest. You're with Team C. Don't screw up. This ain't daycare. Jonathan nodded. He knew the game act invisible. Work like you're desperate, and don't talk back. He found his spot on the line, next to a young man barely 20. Skinny, eyes red with fatigue, hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the feeder on the conveyor. You knew too? Jonathan asked, keeping his tone light. The kid glanced at him. 3rd week. You'll get used to the yelling. Jonathan smiled faintly. Thanks. I'm Mike. Devin. Devin's name would come up again, later at a moment when Jonathan least expected it, and when it would cost him something he didn't realize he still had. By the end of the first day, Jonathan's back ached. His hands were raw, and he had learned more than he ever had in a boardroom. He learned that shifts were routinely extended by mandatory overtime without warning. That breaks were often cut short with made-up reasons. That Doug had a particular hatred for slow workers, especially the ones who spoke Spanish or looked soft. And most of all, he learned that fear was the currency here, not respect. Not loyalty, just fear. At 9:17 p.m., he sat alone at a rusted bench outside the break room, watching the night crew shuffle in with their thermoses and sagging eyes. His phone vibrated. He'd hidden it in a hollowed-out part of his boot. A text from Lorna, his assistant. Your meeting with legal is at 10 tomorrow. Want me to cancel? He didn't reply. A door creaked beside him. Mike, right? A woman with sharp eyes and grease-streaked cheeks stood next to him, holding a worn metal lunchbox. Yeah, he said. Don't sit there too long. Doug calls that loitering. He'll write you up just for breathing. He stood. Noted. Name's Rosa. He nodded, eyes scanning her posture. Strong, tired, watching him carefully. You don't look like the others, she added after a pause. Meaning? Meaning. Most guys come in here already broken. You look like you still expect this place to be fair. He looked at her, meeting her eyes. And is it? She didn't answer, just walked away. Over the next 2 days, Jonathan witnessed 3 workers get humiliated publicly for mistakes that weren't theirs. He watched a woman named Carla break down crying in a bathroom after Doug threatened to cut her hours if she didn't show more gratitude. He also saw quiet acts of kindness. Rosa slipping a sandwich into Devon's locker when no one was looking. An older man named Luis fixing a broken cart and taking credit for nothing. These people weren't just surviving, they were trying to be human in a place designed to crush that. On day 4, he found a hidden corner near the maintenance closet to take notes. Not digital ones, paper, the kind that couldn't be traced. And on that paper, he started a list not just of infractions, but of character. He wrote, Doug, cruel. Controls with fear. Replace, Devon, exhausted, sharp. Promote to training you've coached. Rosa, eyes everywhere. Leadership material. Carla, broken spirit. Offer transfer. Lise, invisible hero. Hidden potential. He stopped writing when he heard a voice Doug shouting in the hallway. You think just because your cousin's sick you get to show up late? Clock in next time or don't come back at all. Jonathan stepped out just in time to see Doug push Devon against a stack of crates. Not hard, but hard enough. That night, he sent a message to Lorna. Start an audit. Discreet. Focus on supervisor behavior at Plant 3, especially Line C. And then he added, also, pull Rosa's file. I want to know why she's still on the floor. Day 5 began with rain. Not the kind of gentle, cleansing rain that washes streets and cools tempers. This was industrial rain gray, heavy, and filled with the smell of metal and oil. The type of weather that makes everything feel colder than it is. Jonathan stood in the alley behind the plant, drenched, pretending to smoke while watching employees arrive. He wasn't looking for anyone in particular. He was studying everyone. And someone was watching him back. You're too quiet, Rosa said from behind. Makes people nervous. He turned slowly. Just thinking. You think too much, you get noticed. Around here, that's dangerous. Jonathan tilted his head. You always this blunt? I've survived here for 6 years. You learn what gets you fired. Or worse. Worse? She gave him a hard look. Ignored. He wanted to tell her everything right then. Who he was, what he was doing, but he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to see it to the end. Inside, the tension had shifted. Doug was quieter today. Ever since Devon's shove, he'd kept his tone tight, sharp, but less reckless. Maybe someone had said something. Maybe he sensed the audit. Or maybe it was Rosa's stare. She'd witnessed the incident, too, and she hadn't looked away. Midway through the shift, a buzzer rang. Unscheduled halt. Confusion rippled across the floor. Doug climbed onto a crate. Listen up, he shouted. Corporate sent down a team for a surprise inspection. You see anyone in a suit? Smile and shut up. Got it? Murmurs, grumbles, a few nods. Jonathan kept his face neutral, but inside he tensed. This wasn't part of his plan. He knew none of the inspectors by face. He'd ordered it that way. But if one of them recognized him, he ducked his head, pulled his cap lower, and slipped toward the back rows of shelving. From there, he observed the interaction from a distance. 2 women in corporate blue walked the floor, escorted by a man in slacks. They took notes, photographed equipment, spoke to 2 workers near the assembly line, Carla and Devon. Carla pointed subtly toward Doug. Doug, to his credit, looked calm, confident, smiled even. But Jonathan could see it, the twitch in his jaw, the way his hand gripped the clipboard too tightly. Doug was panicking inside. And when people like him panic, they get dangerous. That night, Doug changed tactics. Instead of yelling, he joked. Instead of barking orders, he gave fake smiles. He pulled Carla aside and offered her a second chance to prove herself. Jonathan watched it all. He scribbled notes during lunch. But what caught him off guard was Devon. The kid had changed. He stood straighter, spoke clearer, even corrected a misaligned bin on the conveyor without flinching. There was something burning in his eyes, something new. Later, Jonathan approached him at the vending machine. "You did well today." Devin blinked. "Thanks. You thinking of staying?" Devin shrugged. "Didn't think I'd last a week, but someone told me I had potential." "Rosa?" Devin smiled slightly. "Nah, one of the suits. Said I reminded them of someone." Jonathan felt a strange heat in his chest. He didn't like it. "You remind me of someone, too," he said. "Yeah? Me." Devin laughed. "You? You've got a bad back and hands like a professor." Jonathan grinned. "You noticed? Everyone's guessing about you. Some say you're undercover HR. Others say you're a journalist." He paused. "But I think you're something else." "What's that?" "I think you're here to fix something." That night, Rosa confronted him. "You're not who you say you are." Jonathan kept walking, but her words stopped him cold. "I checked with HR. No record of a Mike Danner from the temp agency." He turned. "You spying on me?" "Protecting my people." "And what if I'm here to protect them too?" She folded her arms. "Then prove it." He looked around. The alley was empty. "Follow me." He led her to his car. Not the clunker he'd parked by the lot. His real car hidden in a side garage, behind a gated area only executives used. He opened the trunk. Inside, a file case. Locked. He opened it with a print scanner. He pulled out documents, company memos, HR complaints, legal summaries, photos, notes. Rosa stared. "Jonathan Kessler," she read aloud. "Founder, CEO." She blinked. "This is a joke." He handed her his badge. Gold. Corporate level. "I got a letter," he said. Anonymous. Said my company was rotting from the inside. I wanted to see for myself. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, "You're insane." I had to know the truth. She looked down at the documents again. "Why show me?" "Because you're the only one who doesn't want anything from me. And you're the only one who sees everything." She shook her head slowly. "What now?" Jonathan's voice hardened. "Now we clean house." The next morning, Doug was gone. No warning, no explanation. Just an empty locker and silence from management. Whispers spread like wildfire. Carla cried. Devin smiled. Jonathan said nothing. Not yet. Instead, he began making calls during his breaks, contacting department heads, reviewing shift logs, auditing pay structures. On day 9, Rosa approached him again. "People think you got Doug fired. Did I? I don't care. But if you're really who you say you are ... there's more." She handed him a list. Names, dates, incidents swept under the rug. "I've been keeping it for months," she said, "in case someone like you ever showed up." Jonathan took the list, folded it carefully. "Come with me." They met Lorna in a coffee shop near HQ. Rosa sat stiffly across from her, eyes sharp but uncertain. "This is Rosa Santiago," Jonathan said. "Starting next week, she's head of floor operations for Plant 3. Rosa blinked. "What? You've been doing the job for years. Might as well get the title and the pay." Lorna smiled, impressed. "We'll handle the paperwork." Rosa didn't smile. "You sure about this?" Jonathan looked at her. "Are you?" Week 2 brought a shift in tone. Not just on the factory floor, but in Jonathan himself. He was changing, and not in the way he'd expected. Living inside the system he had once designed from the top down had stripped him of distance. There was no more data between him and their suffering. He could feel it now, under his nails and in his back. Every policy he'd ever approved echoed through these halls. And now he was rewriting them one by one. That morning, Rosa met him by the delivery dock. She wore her new supervisor badge like armor, but her face still held skepticism. 3 people asked me today if you're real, she said. I get that a lot. They think you're some kind of ... corporate ghost, a billionaire playing hero. Am I? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed him a tablet with updated schedules. I've reorganized the shifts. No more forced overtime. Breaks extended to the legal minimum. And I called back Carla. She's on paid leave. Jonathan reviewed the document, nodding. Good? Anything else? She hesitated. Yes, there's one more. He looked up. Devin. What about him? He's bright, smarter than he realizes. But he's angry. He's been through things you haven't seen yet. Jonathan considered. I'll talk to him. He found Devin by the west wall, fixing a jammed conveyor belt alone. No one helping? Jonathan asked. Devin didn't look up, didn't ask. You should. You're not alone anymore. Devin finally turned, eyes guarded. That depends. On what? On whether all of this is real or just a show. Jonathan stepped forward. You want real? Sit with me after your shift. No cameras, no titles. Devin hesitated, then nodded once. They met at a bench by the parking lot, surrounded by wind and rust. I heard you used to live in your car, Jonathan said quietly. Devin flinched. Who told you that? Rosa. Devin shrugged. It's true. Still do sometimes. Depends on the week. Jonathan sat beside him. You ever think about leaving? Every day. So why don't you? Devin looked at him, jaw tight. Because this place, this nightmare, is the only place that gave me a name. Everything else took it from me. Jonathan's throat tightened. You want a real shot, Devin? What kind? Training. Education. A path up, starting next week. Devin's eyes searched his. What's the catch? No catch. Just one condition. Which is? When you make it out, you reach back and pull someone else up. Devin nodded slowly. Deal. By the end of the second week, 3 supervisors had been rotated out. Rosa implemented anonymous reporting procedures. Safety protocols were reviewed, but resistance came from above. Mid-level executives questioned the radical changes. They called Jonathan behind closed doors. This isn't scalable, one said. You're being emotional, said another. Morale doesn't pay dividends. Jonathan listened, then stood. Morale is the dividend. You just never learned how to cash it. And with that, he restructured the leadership model. Rosa was given autonomy over hiring. Floor workers were invited to monthly town halls. Transparency, not fear, became the new currency. And then came the surprise. A second letter. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. Typed like the first. Impressive, Mr. Kessler. You've cleaned the floor. But you still haven't looked up. The rot goes higher. Check the contractors. Jonathan froze. He hadn't thought about the maintenance contracts, security, logistics, all outsourced, all conveniently invisible. He made a call to Lorna. Pull the last 2 years of contracts, maintenance, cleaning, third-party staff. I want to know who signed them, what they're worth, and who got paid. She hesitated. That could mean stepping on some powerful toes, Jonathan. I hope so. The results came within 72 hours. Nearly a quarter of outsourced expenses funneled through a shell company registered offshore. No board oversight. No accountability. And the name on the contracts? Trevor Lang, Jonathan's former COO, a man he'd mentored, trusted, promoted. Lang had resigned 9 months ago, under the pretense of health concerns, but he hadn't left. He'd just moved into the shadows, where the real money was made quietly. Jonathan stared at the report for a long time. He remembered Lang's laugh, his ambition, his promises, and now betrayal. He brought the files to Rosa that night. They sat in the back office, Lights low, the factory humming beyond the walls. "You ever hear of Trevor Lang?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed. "He came here twice. Once during a flood, and once when a worker lost a finger in Machine 7. Jonathan nodded. "He's been siphoning money, millions, through ghost contracts." She leaned back. "What are you going to do?" "Expose him." "And then?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. "I don't know." Rosa leaned forward. "Yes, you do. You're just afraid of what it will cost." He met her eyes. "Everything." Later that week, Jonathan held his first factory-wide meeting. No suits, no speeches. Just him, standing on a crate, surrounded by grease, sweat, and hope. "I came here as a stranger," he began, "to learn the truth about a company I thought I knew. What I found was pain, injustice, but also courage." He scanned the crowd. Devin stood near Rosa. Carla smiled from the second row. Louise leaned on a broom, eyes glistening. "This place will never be the same, because you won't let it be." He paused, then added, "And because I won't either." The room was silent, and then applause, slow, then rising. Raw, real. He stepped down. Devin approached. "So what now?" Jonathan smiled. "Now we go higher." The press conference was scheduled for Friday morning. Jonathan didn't want one, but the legal team insisted. Once the internal investigation confirmed that Trevor Lang had embezzled close to $18 million through fraudulent maintenance contracts, silence was no longer an option. Lorna stood in his office with a printed statement. "You sure you want to do this yourself?" "I'm the one who trusted him. I'm the one who ignored the signs." She looked at him carefully. "It's going to be ugly." "I want it to be ugly." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline of his empire gleamed. Glass, steel, the illusion of perfection. But down below, at ground level, the people who held it all up were still healing. And so was he. Before the press conference, he went back one last time to Plant 3. He walked the floor with Rosa beside him. Workers smiled at him now. Not forced smiles, real ones. There was laughter again, but it no longer sounded like a mask. Rosa handed him a clipboard. Weekly evaluations. "I've added mental health referrals for high-risk staff. And Louise wants to propose a tool redesign. Let him." "Already approved it." He laughed. "Remind me again who's in charge here?" "You are, but I'm in control." He liked that answer. As they passed the East Corridor, Rosa stopped him. "Devin's applying for the apprenticeship program." Jonathan smiled. "I knew he would. He still doesn't trust Easy, but he trusts you now." That meant more to him than any profit margin ever had. Later that day, standing behind the microphone, Jonathan looked out at the sea of cameras and questions. He didn't flinch. "My name is Jonathan Kessler. I founded this company with 2 hands and 1 belief, that people deserve dignity at work. That belief was lost. I lost it. I allowed a culture of fear, corruption, and exploitation to grow under my name." He paused, letting the words hang. "Today, that ends." The journalists erupted. Questions flew. He answered some, refused others. But one stuck with him. "Mr. Kessler, how could you not have known?" His answer was quiet. "Because I stopped looking down. And I stopped listening to the people who weren't paid to agree with me." The room fell silent. The fallout from the Lang scandal was massive. Shareholders panicked. News outlets spun both praise and criticism. Some called Jonathan a hero. Others called him a fool. He didn't care. Lang was arrested in Miami trying to board a private jet. Investigators found 6 offshore accounts and an encrypted laptop containing records of every bribe, every manipulated invoice, every lie. It would take months to clean up the damage, years to rebuild full trust. But something had shifted inside the company and inside Jonathan. He no longer wanted to be seen as a titan or a savior. He wanted to be human again. 1 week after the announcement, Rosa joined him for coffee on the factory rooftop. "I have a question," she said, sipping quietly. "Shoot." If none of this had happened, the letter, the disguise, the rot, would you have ever come down here? He thought for a moment. I'd like to say yes, but I was too far gone, too comfortable, too proud. She nodded. Then maybe the rot did something good, or someone did. They looked out over the city. It was raining again, but this time it felt clean. He visited Devin that evening, surprising him at a community college night class. Devin looked up, startled. "You stalking me now?" "Just checking on my investment." Devin chuckled. "I passed the test. I know. You're getting full sponsorship for the engineering program." Devin's smile faded into something deeper. "Why me?" Jonathan leaned forward. "Because I see in you the fire I lost in myself. And because when you stand up, others follow." Devin nodded slowly. "I won't waste it." "I know." As Jonathan left, he saw something in Devin's posture, something Rosa once had. That rare mix of pain and purpose. It gave him hope. Back in his penthouse, surrounded by silence and expensive emptiness, Jonathan opened the first letter again. The one that had started it all. The decay starts from within. I dare you to see it. And below that ... he now noticed something new. Faintly embossed into the corner of the paper, nearly invisible. A single name, R. Santiago. He stared at it for a long time, then laughed deep, grateful, raw. She had known all along. She hadn't just saved the workers. She had saved him. The next morning, he returned to Plant 3 with something in hand. A new plaque. It read, "In honor of those who refused to stay silent." JMK, beneath it, a list of names. Not executives. Not managers. But Rosa, Devin, Carla, Louise. Dozens of workers whose courage had shifted the tides of a billion-dollar company. When he handed it to Rosa, she didn't say thank you. She simply nodded. "You finally learned." He smiled. "What?" "That leadership isn't about being right. It's about being present." 2 months later, the board held its annual retreat. It was the first one Jonathan had attended in 5 years. Usually, he sent a representative, signed documents from afar, and gave short video speeches about vision and growth. But now he sat at the center of the long mahogany table, surrounded by people who once only heard from him through email chains. His presence made them uneasy. He opened with a single slide on the screen. A photo of the Plant 3 break room. Dingy, cracked tiles, faded posters on the wall. But in the corner, barely visible Rosa, smiling with grease on her hands, surrounded by laughing workers. "Before we talk numbers," Jonathan said, "we talk about this." Someone cleared their throat. "With respect, Jonathan, is that relevant to..." It's the only thing relevant," he interrupted. "Because that's where we failed." He clicked again. Next slide. A comparison of productivity rates before and after the policy reforms Rosa and the others implemented. A sharp rise, less turnover, fewer injuries, higher satisfaction scores, and most notably more innovation. Workers, once afraid to speak, had started improving systems on their own. Jonathan stood, slow and calm. "I didn't come back to save this company. I came back to understand it. And now I see what I refused to before, that fear builds obedience, but trust builds legacy." He let the silence stretch. This company moves forward with people like Rosa Santiago, Devin Carter, and everyone like them. Or it doesn't move forward at all. He walked out before the vote. They approved his reforms unanimously. Back at Plant 3, Devin's apprenticeship was in full swing. He worked side by side with engineers twice his age, and they really listened to his ideas. One afternoon, he redesigned a core part of the assembly mechanism to reduce worker strain. When Rosa saw the report, she laughed. "You're showing off." He shrugged. "I got used to being invisible. Now I'm making noise. You always had it in you. Because of you." She didn't argue. That same week, Luis submitted a proposal to reorganize floor logistics to cut transit time between stages. No one had ever asked him before. No one had even noticed he was watching that closely. Carla returned to work after therapy and leave. This time, she worked in quality control, a department that valued her eye for detail. She didn't flinch when Doug's replacement walked by. She no longer feared being small. She had grown roots. The floor, once gray and hopeless, buzzed with a quiet dignity. It wasn't perfect. Not yet. But it was no longer rotting. One evening, Rosa called Jonathan to the roof again. "I'm resigning," she said simply. His breath caught. "Why?" "Because there are more factories, more plants, more Rosas." He stared at her. "You want to start over?" "I want to build from below." He understood. She wasn't leaving because she was tired. She was leaving because she was ready. He handed her a folder. It contained the official documents to create an independent worker-led advisory board with national reach, budget, autonomy, authority to audit and intervene across the company's entire footprint. "You'll lead it," he said. She blinked. "Are you serious?" "You taught me how." For the first time, she hesitated. "Promise me you won't disappear again." "I promise." They shook hands not as CEO and worker, but as equals. 6 months later, Rosa stood on a stage in front of thousands of workers, launching the Kessler Equity Council. Her voice was strong, confident. National television picked up clips. Headlines read, "Factory Worker Becomes Corporate Watchdog and Revolution Inside the System." Devon stood backstage, helping with logistics, wearing a blue lanyard that read, "Lead Engineer Assistant." He designed the badge himself. Luis sat in the front row, tearing up as Rosa read his name during her speech. Carla spoke at a breakout panel about psychological safety in manual labor. And Jonathan? He sat in the back, alone, smiling, not because he was in charge, but because he wasn't anymore. The third letter arrived almost exactly a year after the first. No return address. Same typewriter font. One line only. "Now you've earned the throne. Just don't sit on it too long." He laughed when he read it. This time, he didn't need to investigate. He knew exactly who sent it. Back at his office, less polished now, more lived in, he stared out at the skyline. But unlike before, his gaze dropped downward, toward the plants, toward the people. A knock on the door. Lorna entered. "They're ready for you?" He stood. No tie. No script, just presence. And as he walked toward the elevator, he thought of all the people who had been invisible before. People like Devon, Rosa, Luis, Carla. They had been the foundation all along. He had just been the roof. And finally, he had come down to join them on the ground.